Hi, my name's Eric, and I'll be reading you selections from today's e-edition of the Cape Cod Times. Today's date is Monday, November 25th of 2024. We'll start with the weather, as we always do. Across the Cape and Islands today, breezy in the morning, mostly sunny with a high of 49. Tonight, mostly cloudy with a low of 35. Tomorrow, a little wet, some rain, clouds, breezy, high of 54. Low of 36. On Wednesday, plenty of sun, high of 47, low of 36. On Thursday, Thanksgiving, looks like it'll be cloudy with afternoon rain. Should make for some mud bowls on those Thanksgiving Day games in high school football. On Friday, a blend of sun and clouds. So, a couple of days of rain, Tuesday and Thursday. It doesn't look like it's going to be heavy. It just looks like it'll be cloudy and spitting most of the day. The sun will rise today at 6:42 a.m. It'll set at 4:14 p.m. We'll have 9 hours, 32 minutes of daylight. The moon will rise at 1:08 a.m. and set at 1:28 p.m. Now, heading to the front of the paper, where the news and, of course, the lottery results are kept. And we read these lottery results because, well, somebody asked for them. If there's something you would like read to people who are blind or print disabled, you can email us at info@audiblelocalledger.org or call us at 508-539-2030. That's 508-539-2030, and we'll consider reading it. And if you miss any of the information that we share in our readings, you can always go to audiblelocalledger.org and click on the Listen tab, and you can catch up on a week's worth of our newspaper readings, as well as a wide variety of periodicals and literature that stay up there, and our shopping guides are up there for what's on sale at the grocery store. And all of that is free for people who are blind or print disabled at audiblelocalledger.org. For the latest results of the lottery, we go to masslottery.com because the Cape Cod Times goes to press too early to give you the latest results, and if you ask for them, you certainly deserve them. So, for the numbers game of Sunday, November 24th, in the midday drawing, the numbers were 2, 5, 7, 5. Again, yesterday's midday drawing results, 2, 5, 7, 5. The evening drawing for the numbers game yesterday of Sunday, November 24th, 1, 3, 8, 5. Last night's drawing of the numbers game, the evening drawing, 1, 3, 8, 5. Mass cash results for Sunday, November 24th, 5, 9, 14, 17, and 28. And Lucky for Life rounds out our lottery results for Sunday, November 24th with 7, 11, 14, 26, and 48. With 15, the bonus number. Good luck to all who play. Remember us if you win. From the front page of today's Cape Cod Times, a 50-year mystery. Cape Cod's Lady of the Dunes case is in a new 3-hour documentary by Gwen Friss. Last month, Richard Hanchett came to Provincetown to dedicate a headstone with an image of his mother, Ruth Marie Terry. Inscribed on the stone are the years of her birth and death, along with the name Lady of the Dunes. I just placed the stone there in Provincetown, and I invited everybody involved, Hanchett said in a telephone interview with the Cape Cod Times. Father Phil blessed the new stone. 2 years ago, Hanchett, who's 65, of Waterford, Michigan, didn't know who his biological mother was. Now he knows the communities that shepherded her in life, growing up in the coal mining town of Whitwell, Tennessee, and in death here on Cape Cod, where her body was found in the dunes of Provincetown in 1974. A new documentary, Lady of the Dunes, Hunting a Cape Cod Killer, looks at the decades-long investigation of the unidentified woman and how the mystery coincided with Hanchett's quest to find his birth mother. The 2-hour premiere of the documentary begins at 8 p.m. on Friday, November 29th. It concludes at 9 p.m. on Saturday, November 30th on Oxygen True Crime Network. The show will be available for streaming later on Peacock, said Crystal Wheeler of NBC Universal Television and Streaming. The 3-hour documentary, producers said, airs new details about the investigation, including the most extensive allegations about contaminated DNA samples and lost physical evidence from the crime scene. It also includes extensive on-camera interviews from Provincetown detectives working the case, including Meredith Lauber, who said the Lady of the Dunes work killed her career. When she first started working in Provincetown, Lauber says in the documentary, "I went to the grave and promised her I would get her name back and get her back to her family." Terry was identified by the Boston FBI office on October 31st of 2022. Lauber retired 9 months later. Hanchet's long search for his birth mother is detailed in the documentary. In last week's interview with the Cape Cod Times, he recalled his awkward encounters with FBI agents who notified him on Halloween 2 years ago that they had found his mother. "I was under the assumption that my mom was alive," Hanchet said, "but they said, no, she died a long time ago." Hanchet said he went home and Googled Lady of the Dunes and was stunned by the masses of information that came pouring back. He couldn't immediately comprehend, he said, that his DNA linked him, showing this woman was his mother. Learning how his mother died, Hanchet said, helped him make sense of a recurring dream he had of a hairy man hitting a woman in the head from behind. Terry died with a crushing blow to the head. Her hands were removed, hindering identification until DNA matching evolved. Her husband, Guy Moldavin, was officially named as her killer on August 28th of 2023. I don't think people necessarily realize she had 2 sets of family, her biological son and her family in Tennessee who were looking for her. And I don't think people living in Provincetown knew how hard the police were trying to identify her, said Maja Norris, showrunner and one of the documentary's executive producers. The documentary delves into how shaken the community of Provincetown was by the Lady of the Dunes, found just 5 years after serial killer Tony Costa's killing field was uncovered in nearby Truro. It looks at how investigators thought a young woman who was active in the Boston and South Shore criminal underworld might have been their unidentified victim. After his mother's remains were identified, Hanchet reached out to her family. He attended a reunion with 55 members of the Terry family, and he has stayed in touch with some of them. His anger at Moldavin bubbles up at times, such as when filling out Terry's death certificate, he wanted to list her cause of death as serial killer. He doesn't understand, Hanchet said, how his mother could marry this man who was already a suspect in the deaths of his former wife and stepdaughter. The documentary's co-producer said Moldavin's death in 2002 left many people unable to get answers that would bring closure. But Hanchet has set out to give his mother a proper farewell, with $2,155 raised in a GoFundMe, including $1,000 from a fundraiser by medium Lauren Robbins, with whom Hanchet had been working. Hanchet purchased the 3rd stone for St. Peter's Cemetery in Provincetown. During his visit last month, Hanchet said he scattered some of her ashes in the dunes where her body was found. In the next few weeks, he'll travel to Whitwell, Tennessee, to scatter the last of her ashes in her native mountains and have a memorial bench dedicated to Terry, whom her family described as a free spirit. "She was in Massachusetts for 50 years waiting for me to come, and I just didn't feel comfortable taking her from there," Hanchet said. Ironically, after 4 exhumations, there was more of his mother in the Massachusetts medical examiner's office than there was in the ground in Provincetown, he said, so I was able to have those parts of her cremated. Norris said folks at Oxygen True Crime, like many around the country, had watched the Lady of the Dunes case for years before she was even identified. "You don't usually get that level of interest in a case that's been cold for so long," Norris said. "There were people all over the country who never forgot about her, and the perseverance paid off." The next headline in today's Cape Cod Times, dated Monday, November 25th, Massachusetts High Court says state shelters can't force families to verify info, by Sam Drysdale of the State House News Service. The state's emergency assistance shelter system cannot insist that families provide third-party verification of certain information, like proof of their family ties, or whether at least one of them is a Massachusetts resident, before immediately placing them into shelter, the Supreme Judicial Court decided Thursday. The 16-page decision came out of a class action lawsuit in 2016 when families and civil rights organizations sued the Department of Housing and Community Development, now the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, the HLC, for denying shelter for certain families who couldn't immediately provide documentation as a precondition of admittance into emergency shelter. The Emergency Assistance, EA, shelter system in Massachusetts is specifically intended to serve families, and HLC has in the past denied groups who couldn't show birth certificates or other legal documents proving that they were related. In every annual budget since 2005, the legislature has included language that HLC shall immediately provide shelter for up to 30 days to families who appear to be eligible for shelter based on statements provided by the family and any other information in the possession of the executive office. It was the interpretation of this language that's annually rewritten into state law that led the courts to their decision. The plain language of the immediate placement proviso provides that a family must receive immediate temporary placement where it appears that the family meets the eligibility requirements for shelter, and that the appearance of eligibility may be established at the time of initial application by statements from family members and by information already in the agency's possession. Third-party verification of eligibility criteria is not required at the time of initial application, says the decision, which was written by Supreme Judicial Court Associate Justice Gabrielle Wolhogian. Kelly Turley of Massachusetts Coalition for the Homeless, who filed an amicus brief in the case, said the 30 days families have after being immediately placed into shelter often gives them time to either find or recover lost documents or find other avenues to prove relation and residence. In some cases, families are actively fleeing domestic violence, or they experienced a fire, or they've been doubled up and their belongings were lost in the shuffle, or somebody stole them. So those key documents that are requested to prove ongoing eligibility may not be ready at the time of application, Turley said. She later added the legislative intent is to make sure that families who are eligible for shelter are able to access it in a timely way. We think it's really significant that the SJC has made clear to the administration that families who appear to be eligible should be placed immediately. Though Turley celebrated the decision, she said that it's less effective now than it would have been in 2016 when Governor Charlie Baker's administration oversaw state agencies at actually getting families into shelter more quickly. Since the lawsuit began, the landscape around EA shelters has shifted considerably. Following a surge in demand that started in the late fall of 2022, the Healey administration has implemented a number of strict restrictions on shelter access for the 7,500 families who find temporary housing in the state-run facilities. Over the past year and a half, in an attempt to control surging costs, Governor Maura Healey instituted a cap of 7,500 families. Others seeking shelter are put on a waiting list, now called a contact list. The governor also instituted a 9-month limit to how long families can stay, as well as a controversial policy that allows families to stay in overflow shelters for up to 5 days, but then disqualifies them from seeking more traditional shelter for 6 months. Turley said since most families are going on to the waiting list when they apply for shelter, instead of immediately into temporary housing, the SJC's decision just doesn't have as much of an effect. Even though a family is approved presumptively for a full EA placement, they may be waiting days, weeks, or months to actually get placed. So in those cases, the 30-day period, they may be out of shelter during that time anyway because there isn't a placement available for them, Turley said. She and other providers have advocated against the restrictions to EA, and Turley said Thursday that she hopes they'll be lifted in the future. And then the SJC decision will have a greater impact protecting families who are fleeing dangerous situations to be able to find a safe place to stay immediately. Asked to comment on the decision, a spokesperson for HLC said, "We're reviewing the SJC's decision and the operational impact it may have on the emergency assistance program." Moving into the Cape and Islands section as we keep it local here at the Audible Local Ledger. Concerns after dead raccoon test positive for rabies, by Eric Williams. Where did the dead raccoon come from? That somewhat peculiar question is a matter of high concern for public health officials after the deceased animal, found on the side of Smith Lane in Eastham on November 17th, tested positive for rabies. The curious circumstances around the discovery of the animal have led officials to believe the raccoon may have been transported to Eastham. Anyone who came into contact with the raccoon may have been exposed to rabies, a viral disease that's almost 100% fatal without appropriate treatment, according to a release from the Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment. According to the release, any individual who may have touched or interacted with the animal should consult a physician regarding post-exposure prophylaxis as soon as possible. Officials also want to understand more about the raccoon's origin. According to the release, knowing where the raccoon came from, how it was infected with rabies, and how it died are critical to remediation and prevention efforts. They're seeking information from anyone who knows more about the incident. The animal was discovered near the entrance to Wild Care of Cape Cod, a wildlife rehabilitation center in Eastham. According to the release, the raccoon had porcupine quills in its muzzle and arms, and a blue cloth had been draped over its backside. The porcupine quills are a clue that the raccoon may have come from off-Cape. Porcupines aren't common on Cape Cod, the release stated. Wildlife experts suspect any porcupine sightings within the last 15 or so years are due to accidental translocation. For example, a juvenile porcupine was thought to come over on a shipment of Christmas trees in 2009. This makes an encounter between the raccoon and a porcupine much less likely on Cape Cod, said Brian Bjorklund, coordinator of the Cape Cod and Southeast Massachusetts Rabies Program, in a phone interview with the Times. I suspect it ended up in someone's car, said Bjorklund. It clearly had some human interaction. Bjorklund also added that the quills were an early indication that the raccoon had contracted rabies, because healthy raccoons steer clear of porcupines. According to the release, raccoon variant rabies has not been detected on Cape Cod since 2021, when a rabies-positive raccoon was discovered in Hyannis. That animal was found to have originated in Plymouth. Prior to 2021, the last case of raccoon variant rabies on Cape Cod was in 2013. A DNA sample was taken from the dead raccoon, which may allow officials to pinpoint where it came from. Those results may be available before Thanksgiving, according to Bjorklund. Officials are encouraging anyone with information about the raccoon and where it came from to contact Bjorklund at 413-537-9394 or send an email to care@capecod.gov. From Steve Heslip, the Cape Cod Times photographer, photo shoot section, take in the entire scene of a snowflake photo. There's a reason you haven't seen the photo above before, or perhaps it looks familiar in an odd way. The explanation is crop failure. Two fearful words for farmers and photographers. And the picture, a little bit of description, says, Town of Barnstable, Hyannis Rotary Club, Hyannis. And it's a banner at an overhang, and there are snowflakes that have been cut out that are hanging off the banner, very large ones, probably 2 feet wide, each of them, and there's an individual up there on a ladder hanging more snowflakes. Photojournalists are no strangers to this phenomenon of crop failure. Much like sausage making, the long pathway from click of the shutter to newspaper in the driveway with beautifully reproduced photographs, perfectly cropped, is a dangerous journey. The first dangers are time and space. The closer to deadline a photo arrives, its future is uncertain. Most of the paper is already laid out. In the days of old, a black and white print handed over to the photo editor often met its match when the red grease pencil and ruler came out, marking out a not always flattering crop to be followed by a page designer. In 2024's digital world, it's much easier to hack up a photo without leaving any fingerprints along the way. Not sure how that happened. When regionalized production arrived, the Cape Cod Times is printed at the Providence Journal and pages laid out at various work sites. Following the path a news photo takes to get to print is a winding road. So every day, after doing our best to craft a well-composed photograph, the send button is pushed, and off it goes. Nothing to do but wait. The anticipation is much like Christmas morning. Retrieving the bundle of papers from the side door of the office every day, heading inside to unwrap the day's edition. It's interesting to watch a news photographer read the paper, flipping through the pages, checking just the photos and the layout. This involves lots of self-commentary. Why was that on page 1? They used the wrong photo. What a terrible crop. But most days, things go as planned and there are no surprises. But when the emails and text messages arrive early, it's bad news. Such was the case with the cold weather standalone photo above. There's an old saying, if you don't want it cropped, make it a square. And I keep taking chances anyway. So a narrow horizontal with person far right was a risk. Indeed, the printed image carried a caption describing Aaron Walker hanging snowflakes, but he was nowhere to be seen when the photo was published, simply a square with some snowflakes. As Scarlett O'Hara famously states at the end of Gone with the Wind, well, after all, tomorrow is another day. The next local headline sounds like something you might hear down south. Chicken coop catches fire in Sandwich, by Zane Razak. Just before midnight on Saturday, Sandwich firefighters responded to a chicken coop fire on Route 130 by Pimlico Pond Road. When they arrived, firefighters found the 15 by 20 chicken coop on fire with flames extending to the surrounding brush at 40 Route 130. Firefighters removed additional animals near the coop while putting water on the fire. They took 30 minutes to extinguish the fire and spent another hour wetting down hotspots, said Sandwich Fire Chief John Burke in a press release. A total of 14 firefighters responded to the fire. No injuries were reported. The Sandwich Fire Department and Fire Investigation Unit will investigate the cause. The Bourne Fire Department provided station coverage and handled additional calls during the fire. There are 2 obituaries in today's Cape Cod Times. The first is of Margaret Ann Beaudry of Eastham, who passed on Friday, November 15th at her home, surrounded by family and friends and by prayers from those who could not be by her side. Margot was born in Framingham in 1950 and graduated nursing school in 1970. She worked at Framingham Union and Boston City hospitals before moving to Cape Cod in 1979. She then began her long nursing career on the Cape, which included Cape Cod Hospital, private duty nursing, the Visiting Nurses of Cape Cod, the AIDS Support Group, and finally VNA Hospice. She was one of the good ones. Hospice was her calling. She helped many people in our community navigate the end of life. She also worked at Willie's Gym teaching aerobics and martial arts. She was a fun and silly spirit, always down for a good time, always willing to help someone else. If someone was in need, she would drop whatever she was doing to help. While we don't understand why she had to leave us all so abruptly, we will do our best to make peace with it and remember and honor her as best we can. Called a force by many, she'll be remembered for her big personality, her silly theatrical ways, her amazing nursing skills, her relentless work ethic, and her love of her family. She is survived by many who will miss her dearly. Life will never be the same without her. Her memorial service will be Friday, December 13th at 2 p.m. It'll be followed by a party at the Elks at 4 p.m. for family and friends. We hope you can join us in celebrating her fabulous life. In lieu of donations, please do something to celebrate yourself. The other obituary in the Cape Cod Times of Monday, November 25th, is of Dana Palmer of Bournedale. He passed at the age of 73 recently. He graduated from Bourne High School, received a BA in Fire Sciences from Cape Cod Community College, and was a proud member of the Bourne Fire Department for 37 years. While on the department, he helped deliver 2 baby boys. He is survived by his loving wife, Donna, and many who will miss him dearly. If you ever wanted to find Dana, you could always find him in his greenhouse and garden, which he cultivated for over 50 years. A visitation will be held from 2 to 5 p.m. on November 30th at the Nickerson Bourne Funeral Home at 40 MacArthur Boulevard, with a service to follow at 5 p.m. We want to thank Dr. Robert Godet, and his amazing staff for all of their help and care. For donations, please consider either the Bourne Firefighters Rescue Fund, P.O. Box 911, Buzzards Bay, or homelessfortheholidaybborn.org/donate. There is a national obituary. Veteran game show host Woolery dies at age 83 by Brendan Morrow of USA Today. Chuck Woolery, the game show veteran, best known as the original host of Wheel of Fortune, has died. He was 83. Woolery's friend and podcast co-host Mark Young confirmed to USA Today Sunday that Woolery died at his home in Texas with his wife Kristen by his side. The cause of death wasn't disclosed. He was a dear friend. Life will not be the same without him, Young said. Woolery hosted Wheel of Fortune from 1975 to 1981 before he was replaced by Pat Sajak amid a contract dispute. Sajak has since retired and been succeeded by Ryan Seacrest. In 2017, Woolery told the New York Times he got on board with supporting Trump for fear of losing the Constitution altogether, for fear of going down this hyper-socialist road. He said on X in 2019 that he pretty much destroyed my career by openly supporting Trump and letting all know that I'm a conservative. Painful at times, but true, he wrote. After all is said and done, it was my choice. I can live with it. I'd do it all again. Woolery is survived by his sons Michael and Sean and his daughter, Melissa. And as we come to the end, our last reading in today's Cape Cod Times will be also keeping it local as we move to sports. Mashpee's success depends on its physical offensive line by Alan Gunn in Mansfield. Hard work and resiliency has taken the Mashpee football team all the way to the Division VII state championship at Gillette Stadium. It wasn't easy, but the third-ranked Falcons, who are 9-2, passed their latest test after holding on for a 28-22 win over number 2 Clinton, who's 8-3, in the Final Four on a chilly, windswept Saturday at Mansfield High School. Give them, meaning Clinton, credit, Falcons coach Matt Treveri said. We were right there to make and plays, and their quarterback didn't panic, so it's a hell of a win. We survived, and I think that's the way to put it. Mashpee made the first of many impactful plays right out of the gate after the defense swarmed to the ball and forced a fumble on the opening drive. Falcons turned that into 6 points after quarterback Dominic Mattiotto connected with wide receiver Ryan Treveri for their first of 2 touchdown passes. Mattiotto, who usually relies on his legs more than his arm to make plays, had strikes of 34 yards and 64 yards before halftime to help mount a 20-7 lead. When one thing doesn't work, he showed he could adapt and still get the ball into the hands of his skill position players. We have so many guys who can make plays. Just happened to be me in the beginning, Ryan Treveri said. Logan Wills took over the mantle and punched it inside the red zone for a pair of rushing touchdowns of his own, and he capped off a 7.5-minute drive to start the second half with a run from 5 yards out. His second touchdown of the night and a successful 2-point conversion put the Falcons up 28-7 with 4:27 left in the third quarter. From there, it seemed as if they were going to run away with it, but the Gales fought back after a mistake-ridden opening 31 minutes of gameplay. Falcons had recovered an onside kick after their first touchdown and then secured a loose ball after a punt hit the back of Gale in coverage. First drive of the third quarter was aided by an offsides penalty after Matteodo drew the flag on a 4th and 2 to extend it. Whenever there was a moment, there was a Falcon that made it happen. The win sets up a matchup with defending champions and top-seeded Uxbridge, which has outscored its opponents 118-24 in 3 playoff games. And with that, we've come to the end of our reading of the Cape Cod Times of Monday, November 25th of 2024. We've read you all the local news. This is your reader, Eric, saying, be well, be safe, look after each other. Remember our veterans, especially those we've lost recently, and have a very happy Thanksgiving week. Bye for now.